Hello, 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 and welcome back to the Daily Stack. We are here on Friday. Of course, it is the Friday Stack, our most fun day of the week. We give away some Bitcoin. We talk about the biggest topics going on in the world. I mean, it's absolutely crazy what's going on, of course. The Iran conflict is about to turn a week old. Oil is pushing $90. Bitcoin is higher than where it was before this whole entire conflict started. So much to cover, and we are very grateful to be joined by Ari Redbord, Global Head of Policy at TRM Labs, a leading blockchain intelligence firm, keeping on track of everything that's going on in terms of fraud, money laundering, financial crime, and of course, sanctions evasion, a very big topic when it comes to Iran and what is going on over there. Ari, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much. And I loved it. You had Ari the second time around. It's Ari, not Ari. And I love that. And in fact, I just posted on LinkedIn, I think last night, because I've been so public lately and it's always mispronounced. So missed it the first time, got it the second time. Thank you. But thanks for having me on, especially in this really extraordinary moment. So really looking forward to the conversation today.
Cheers. And Jody, how are you doing?
Yeah, good morning. I mean, after last week, Brandon quit him. I thought we had a great show. I was just listening in, doing producer work. But the signs that we're in a fourth turning, I think, was a great Mount Rushmore. You, Rob, specifically put war in Iran as this one of your signs that we're going into a fourth turning or are in a fourth turning. And things escalated from there post-show. So not something to celebrate necessarily, but it is good to be informed. And I think a lot of the information we all get on X is too much AI generated stuff that no one can really trust. So I think it's great to have these conversations. You know, normally we're going to play little games on here, which are fun, but honestly, I'm excited for this conversation as well with you, Ari. Just get some real info from what you're seeing at TRM, what you just released a resource report specifically on Iran and the exchange and the Bitcoin flows there. So excited to dive into all of that.
Yeah, amazing. Dive right in.
Yeah, well, first, let's get an intro to your role at TRM Labs and what you guys do, what the service you guys provide.
Terrific. Absolutely. And thanks so much. So I'm Ari Redbord. I'm the Global Head of Policy at TRM. We are a blockchain intelligence company, which means we work with law enforcement agencies globally. And that use case is kind of the sexy use case that you see in all these cool graphs. Wait, they're using our tool to track and trace the flow of funds in crypto to build investigations, prosecutions, seizures, forfeitures. I know we'll be talking about all of those things today. But we also work with regulators, and they use us to make licensing determinations for cryptocurrency businesses. They use us for ongoing supervision. And then we work with compliance teams globally who use our tool to make sure that bad actors are not engaging with their platform. So we're doing transaction monitoring and screening wallets for sanctioned or illicit activity. Prior to joining TRM, about 5.5 years ago, I left about 11 years as a federal prosecutor at the Department of Justice, where I focused really on that intersection between money laundering and national security, what I call threat finance. So think terrorist financiers, sanctions, criminal prosecutions. After that, I spent about 2 years at the U.S. Treasury Department working in the Office of Terrorism and Financial Intelligence, which really oversees the national security apparatus at Treasury. So think OFAC, which is our sanctions regulator, FinCEN, which is our AML regulator, our financial intelligence unit, and sort of other components. So really, look, I've spent my entire career trying to stop bad guys from accessing the financial system. And now I get to do it at a really cool startup at TRM.
Wonderful. And so just from a broader perspective, when it comes to financial crime, money laundering, all this stuff, Bitcoin and crypto gets a lot of the blame these days, but the vast 90+% is still going on in the TradFi system, correct?
Yeah, well said. And I always start off with exactly just that. Because look, 24/7, I think much to my wife's chagrin, like I think constantly about illicit finance in crypto. It's like, it's all I think about, stopping bad guys from using cryptocurrency. But the reality is that illicit finance makes up still a very, very small percent of overall activity. We put out a 2026 crypto crime report a few weeks ago that basically said we saw about 158 billion in illicit activity within crypto. That's a record year. We're talking hacks, we're talking ransomware, terrorist financing, sanctions. But even in a record-setting year, that 158 billion accounted for just 1.2% of all activity within the crypto ecosystem. Yeah. That 1.2% keeps me up at night because it's rogue regimes like Iran, it's hackers from North Korea, it's people losing their life savings to pig butchering scams. But the reality is, it's like always so important to start out any conversation with this is an overwhelmingly lawful ecosystem that is our job to protect.
Yeah. And Ari, before Iran, and we jump into that, what was your focus? Like, were you already premeditating a little bit of like, this is where the next, conflict is going to happen? Or were you busy working on a deep research project and you're like, oh, I got to drop that and get right into.
Yeah, I wish I had the time to ever work on a deep research project. But I think the reality is, at TRM, we're thinking about like every risk category, and maybe it's helpful because it's actually really cool stuff. Essentially what we do, what our secret sauce is we have a team of threat hunters that are assigned to every category you can imagine. So we have someone who focuses full-time on ransomware. She's a former FBI analyst who focused on ransomware in the Bureau. We have, in my humble opinion, the foremost expert in the world on North Korea, a guy named Nick Carlson, who was the FBI analyst on all things North Korea, not just crypto. We have someone who focuses full-time on child sexual abuse material, someone who focuses full-time on sanctions. We have someone who focuses full-time on Iran, Russia. I mentioned North Korea. So, and what they're doing is they're out there attributing cryptocurrency addresses. So our Iran expert, long before there was a conflict with Iran here, was labeling addresses on the blockchain that we associated with the regime, whether it's the IRGC, which is Iran's elite military unit that also sort of runs the financial life of the country, whether it's that Iran central bank. We're associating those alphanumeric cryptocurrency addresses with the Iranian regime, just like we're associating with CSAM actors or darknet markets, or, hey, you made a payment in Bitcoin to this ransomware address. We take that address and we label it ransomware in our tool. We then use machine learning and AI to build out a larger and larger database of those addresses, right? We don't want to know just that one address that we've associated with terror financing. We want to know all the addresses that have associated with it. And then we map the sort of illicit crypto economy. So to your question, we have a full-time team that's been working on Iran, long before, obviously, certainly the war, but even, over the last, several years.
Yeah. One thing I'll follow up to that is, a fun meme. It's not maybe like fun, funny is, when we struck the cartels in Mexico, a meme comes out that's like, the cartels are about to find out why like Palantir trades at 47 times earnings. And, Palantir is this like almost a meme stock in a sense of, crazy valuation versus like their relative earnings. But there's so much potential. People look down the line of where global conflict is going to be. And Palantir also is just some core things that they do is tie different data points together to come up with the probability of a scenario happening and pinpoint like who it is. Is it somewhat like you guys are Palantir-esque in a sense of like a defensive technology that's using this information?
It really is. Look, I think we're in this really interesting moment in human history where the private sector has all of the data, right? Like what I just described to you is the way we build the largest blacklist of cryptocurrency of financial crime in the world, right? We are magnitudes larger than the SAR database that FinCEN maintains just because of the nature of public ledgers. So we have all of this rich data. And the government has all of the authorities. And what's absolutely critical, more critical in this moment than we've ever had before, is that we work really closely together. We can get into this as much as you want, but I believe that the private sector should have more authorities. You've heard about letters of marque maybe have become in vogue again, right? Like I want a letter of marque that says if a North Korea cyber criminal hacks us, I can hack them back. I want to be able to leverage our team and our space to actually do some of that work, have those authorities. But the public sector also needs to have all that data. And that's where sort of the data providers like us, and you mentioned Palantir and others sort of come into play here. So I think the answer is absolutely. Look, it's interesting because the Iran situation is obviously very kinetic right now, right? We're seeing airstrikes, we're seeing true war zone. But the reality is more and more wars are not being fought on battlefields. They're being fought in cyberspace and across blockchains. And I think then that's when this information, this data, the ability to track and trace becomes so important. So I think it's a great point.
And before we dive into the specific headlines for today, I want to ask you about your views on privacy with Bitcoin in general, right? I mean, this is the largest ledger in the world, you could say, for finance in some regards. It's pseudo-anonymous, so it's anonymous when you first sign up, but if you have funds, you can trace them, da-da-da-da. Where do you philosophically fall on the line between users should have complete freedom to privacy tools and being able to use this as a law enforcement vehicle?
I love the question. I'm not sure I would call myself a privacy maxi, but I'm pretty close. And it's funny, I think people are shocked to hear that as like the face of surveillance in our space or some nonsense like this. We just put out a white paper, a 70-page white paper that I would really, really encourage your listeners to use, to read. It's on our website at trmlabs.com. It is on privacy. Because from day one, I think at TRM, we have believed in the absolutely critical importance of privacy in an open financial system, right? Like, I don't want anyone to see my credit card transactions. It's the same way I don't want anyone to be able to associate my crypto address and look at what we're seeing right now. I think that privacy enhancing tools like mixers and privacy coins, zero knowledge proofs, I think digital identities can become a really critical part of this. We are going to live in a world where we need that financial privacy. And I think it's going to be critical that lawful users have access to these tools. That said, we also have to figure out how to ensure that bad actors do not have access or cannot take advantage of these tools. And I think that's really where the technology comes in. And I've spent a lot of time even on Capitol Hill talking about these issues, particularly around DeFi. We need to basically be really leveraging this technology to make sure that bad actors are not using it. And that's where I really think blockchain intelligence comes in. I think that that's where zero knowledge proofs come in. Big fan of what folks are building in like the Canton network, privacy enhancing privacy chains. There's so much happening right now in our space. Really encourage folks to read. It is, I think it's arguably, someone might push back on this, I think it's arguably the most in-depth thing that's been written on the importance of privacy in our space, ironically from us. So give it a read. I want to do some roundtables on this. I want to talk about this really publicly because I think it's incredibly important, but we do have to thread a needle, right? North Korea cannot use mixers to launder billions of dollars. Like that cannot also happen. So it's like, how do we go after the bad actor to allow these lawful users to use these services? So it's super critical here.
It is. And it's awesome to hear you say that because, I mean, a lot of people could look at an open blockchain and say, hey, this is the perfect way to know what everybody is spending their money on. So we got to ensure that privacy is a big part of it all, but we also need to be able to track bad guys, such as this one right here. John Dagita. I
am so impressed. I probably put that up 20 minutes ago, max, on our website. You are on it. I love it.
Got to be on top of it. Absolutely. I mean, this story is absolutely insane. So many different failures when it comes to the government, the way that they custody, and this guy, the fact that he was on the run for quite some time, but they finally caught him. Right. So if you could give us a little bit of background on John, aka Lick, and what he did to the strategic Bitcoin reserve, tell our listeners what is going on here.
A couple of really important points of clarity on this. First of all, I would encourage folks to read it. This is on our site. It literally just came up. It's like hot off the presses. I don't think anyone has covered it yet. So kudos to you guys.
Covered it today.
Yeah, I love that. Amazing. Yeah, boom. So first of all, really important. So there is no strategic Bitcoin reserve today. It was discussed in an executive order. I'm hopeful that at some point, Congress will legislate around this and we can really start to build this, or at least, make Bitcoin a part of some of the strategic types of investments we already have going. So there's no reserve yet. I know there was an executive order that came out and everyone got really fired up about it because it is such a great concept, but we haven't built it yet. So really what this individual was doing was stealing funds from wallets that were controlled by the U.S. Marshal Service. And those wallets contained some funds that came from some pretty big cases, including the Bitfinex hack, which was ultimately the largest seizure in world history, about 3.6 billion of funds seized back. I think your listeners maybe have seen, but myself and my colleague Christian Chesky were featured in a really cool documentary called The Biggest Heist Ever on Netflix by the director of Tiger King and 100-Foot Wave and other stuff about that very case. Super fun, super interesting. The colorful couple that got arrested was, the headline. Razzle Khan, people know it as. Yeah. So those wallet addresses can contain a lot of funds and some very, very important funds. The other piece to this that is so interesting and why this case is so wild is that I don't think of it as a systemic failure. Certainly not a failure by the marshals or by law enforcement. And you might get plenty of people who disagree with that. But really, this was an inside job. And I know the case is still being developed, but the reality is that this was someone seemingly who had access to these accounts because they were the government, or at least there was a relationship with the government contractor who was working on these accounts. Someone asked me to describe this recently because I think that people are seeing it as this failure of law enforcement. And they said, well, what do you mean it's not a failure of law enforcement? I said, look, there's a huge difference between someone breaking into the Louvre and stealing a high value piece of art than a security guard that was hired essentially by the government to keep that art safe, ultimately being the one to steal it. So maybe there's a failure of government contracting here at some level, but I'm not sure that I would ever put this on the federal law enforcement agents who are sort of working these cases typically. All of that said, hats off to Zach XBT.
Yeah.
I mean, it is only in crypto could a private investigator, right, on X be able to unravel a case like this from the beginning, right? Often I've seen him do cases where maybe there's a law enforcement lead, he goes deeper. This was 100% his case, with then the FBI jumping in and doing a really great job of taking it to the next level, ultimately making that arrest. So yeah, definitely read the piece, but it's fascinating. It basically came down to this, right? And crypto folks make this mistake all the time. Don't flex, right? This guy was trying to show off his bag and he showed off to the wrong person and he got arrested for it ultimately. So really, really extraordinary investigation by Zach XBT, who I am in awe of all the time. He's a TRM partner, has been for years.
Oh, cool.
The graphs that you see in Twitter from Zach are always our graphs. So kind of check them out. Yeah. And one thing that's also really cool, people don't also know that we stood up this thing called Beacon Network in August, which is the largest partnership in all of crypto. It accounts for about 85% of all centralized transaction volume. Basically, what we saw was that bad actors were moving funds faster than ever before. And we felt like we needed to move faster. So we reached out to the two most important cryptocurrency exchanges in the world, Binance and Coinbase, and they said, we're in. So we then onboarded Kraken and OKX and HTX and Poloniex, Crypto.com, Blockchain.com, fintechs like Stripe and Robinhood and PayPal. Ripple is in there. We then married that group with about 70 global law enforcement agencies. And those law enforcement investigators are flaggers. So if they see illicit proceeds moving in real time, they flag the address and send out an alert. Think Beacon, think Lighthouse, right? They send out an alert to that network of exchanges. Now, why am I bringing Beacon up here? Is because the other thing we did is hey, we want to have all of the best investigators in the world, not just law enforcement. So we reached out to Zach, who's a member of Beacon. We reached out to a number of other sort of private investigators out there who are doing this work. So my point here is that these are only in crypto stories, right? Bad guys can move larger amounts of funds than ever before, but we can trace them and we can seize them back. And this case is a cool example. Yeah, were there systemic failures involved here? Certainly, but there's an ongoing case here. I assume it'll play itself out in court. But the reality is hey, an arrest was made, funds were seized. Let's see where all this goes.
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple things here. I mean, I remember when the Strategic Bitcoin Reserve executive order first came out, there was an article on CoinDesk talking about the U.S. Marshals, how they custody this Bitcoin, how it's held in different offices. The FBI has some, the Marshals have some. It's all over the place, and that we're still waiting for the audit right? That was supposed to come with the strategic Bitcoin reserve. So wondering when that's going to come about. And then just the audacity of this kid, right? To steal it from his dad is working for the government. He steals $20 million plus from the government and then goes on the run and thinks that he can get away with doing these dust attacks on XBT and showing off his wallets. Just absolutely
I'm
crazy.
telling you, I mentioned Netflix earlier. Like, this is absolutely made for TV.
Yeah.
How does that? What do you think is Zach XBT's like sauce is? Like, what makes him so good? Is it team behind him? Is it?
Yeah, it's interesting. I don't know him. We have a team that has some interaction there. Just since he's accessing the tool. So I don't know to the extent that he has a team behind him. But I do know that what I see out there, and I follow him very closely, is just pure hustle. And it's just something I've really come to admire. I was in the government for a long time, came to TRM about 5.5 years ago. We were 8 people. We're about 400 today. We just announced a raise at $1 billion. I mean, you just pinch yourself, and people ask like, well, how do you do, like, how does that happen? And it's just like, you're working all the time. And it's just like dedication to your craft. And these things are like interesting milestones, but you just keep going. And I see a lot of that in Zach, like that, just like very entrepreneurial, like driven, focused. But again, like, I don't know him, so this is just like me from his profile and following him really closely. Andy Greenberg from Wired Magazine did a really cool story on Zach, maybe a year ago, maybe less, where he really kind of dug into the work, and it's really worth a read.
Yeah, in Bitcoin, you have a lot of autodidacts, right? People who teach themselves all this stuff. Were you into blockchain before you got involved with TRM?
It's such a great question. Like, I've been asked, like, what's the origin story, right? Like, I wish it was that I bought, like, in the early days and, was driving a Lambo and like all that good stuff. But, sadly, like, I was a prosecutor, I'd say around 2016-ish, 2015, 2016. I started seeing Bitcoin in a number of cases involving North Korea. And this was long before we were seeing the hacking sort of Lazarus group types of activity. Really, in those early days, North Korea was just experimenting with how to launder Bitcoin, right? Just like everything else. They were using counterfeit $100 bills and counterfeit cigarettes. They were trying to hack the Bank of Bangladesh and Sony Pictures because they hated that movie. What was that movie called? The
Interview?
The Interview. Yeah. The Interview with Seth Rogen. And we're seeing that kind of malicious activity, right? But North Korea at some point realized that, like, we don't just have to use this for laundering, like, we can actually steal it. And that's when I think we saw this real proliferation involving North Korea. But that for me was really the early days. And I said, wow, this technology is really interesting. I'd love to learn more about it. I then went over to the Treasury Department, and Libra launched while I was at Treasury. Facebook sort of failed stablecoin project. And I thought it was extremely interesting. Treasury freaked out. We jumped on a plane and went to Switzerland to meet with FINMA, the Swiss regulator, to talk about anti-money laundering and Libra and what we could do to help. Ultimately, it failed mostly because of politics. I think it was a great project, ultimately led by really great, smart people. It's an interesting, to me, it's like got to be a really important chapter in the history of our space in terms of regulation. We now have comprehensive stablecoin legislation in the United States, genius, which would have been perfect for that moment too. But it took 10 years, Anyway, my point is that, like, I was just starting to see it more and more and got really, really interested in the technology. And when I started to think about what's next, it was a space I wanted to go into, but it's also a space that, like, for me, it's always about stopping bad guys, protecting the financial system. And when I met Esteban Castano, who's our CEO, I was like, wow, this is just a incredibly mission-oriented, smart, young person who's doing something really cool in the space. This would be a really great journey.
Wow. And now you are in the middle of it all. And next, I would love to talk about Iran and what they are doing in terms of Bitcoin mining, sanctions, evasion, all of that. But before we get into it, we got to give a big shout out to our friends over at Rhino. Previously, getting access to Bitcoin financial services was slow, clunky, and scattered across all these different platforms. But Rhino is changing that. Rhino is a next generation Bitcoin banking app designed to handle all of your Bitcoin needs in one place. Here's what you can do with Rhino. Of course, buy Bitcoin with some of the lowest fees anywhere, make payments over the Lightning Network, send cash globally, fast and easy. And of course, you can set up a DCA plan, set up automatic savings so you can stack sats on your schedule and build wealth over time. And soon with Rhino, you'll be able to pay bills, direct deposit, borrow against your Bitcoin, and even save for retirement, all within one app. And of course, Rhino protects your Bitcoin with the top level of security. We're talking biometric verification, 24/7 fraud protection, and the confidence of knowing your Bitcoin is never, ever rehypothecated. So go today to rhinobitcoin.com and download the app. It's on iOS and Android. Use the code Bitcoin News and you'll get $10 of free Bitcoin into your account today just for getting started. Big friends of the Rhino team. Hit them up on Twitter. They're more than happy to answer any of your questions and get you started on the Bitcoin banking app of the future. All right. So now let's dive into this. Could you please tell us, what does Iran do when it comes to their sanctions and Bitcoin and Bitcoin mining? What's going on there?
Yeah, look, I'm kind of glad this is live because honestly, this is changing on the ground so quickly. I'm getting pings from my team regularly, even today, that we're seeing sort of interesting changes in flows and that sort of thing. So just like maybe zooming out a little bit, crypto in Iran has just been interesting for a number of years. And we've seen crypto used at scale by average Iranians who are looking to access the financial system. According to TRM, we put out a sort of global adoption report several months ago that said, Iran had about 11 billion in cryptocurrency activity in 2025. And that's significant. And most of that is what I would characterize as lawful activity by average Iranians. Now, I want to put what we say is about 5% of that activity is illicit, okay? But one thing that's really, really important to caveat that is Iran is a comprehensively sanctioned jurisdiction. And I know you're like, I don't know how deep we need to go on sanctions with this group,
Yeah.
but it is the most sanctioned place on earth, basically. There are a couple others that might sort of fit that bill. But the reality is that every single financial institution in Iran is sanctioned, okay? You don't have to be on OFAC's list as a specific entity. And I'll get into those specific entities in a moment. If you're a financial institution in Iran, a bank, a lender, a custodian, a cryptocurrency business, you are sanctioned, which means that 5% is just real illicit activity, right? People using crypto to do bad things. But pretty much all of it is sanctioned. So I think really, really important point. So when if there are folks who are compliance professionals on here from an exchange, they know that they can engage with Novatex. Novatex is the largest cryptocurrency and exchange in Iran. What happens in Novatex is essentially what happens in Iran. It's that important to the overall sort of ecosystem. We put out a report. Yeah, there you go. You guys are on it. I love this. It never happens. It's like I'm, I don't know, Jediing stuff onto the screen right now. Yeah. So yeah, this, I would encourage folks to really read this. We go super deep on Novatex, volume, why it's important. Early last year, a hacking group closely to the authorities called hacked Novatex, an incredibly cool heist that basically took funds out of the exchange and put it into an inaccessible wallet. In other words, hackers didn't steal the funds; they just took them off Novatex's platform. Impossible for Novatex to text it. One thing that was really interesting in that hack, there were also leaked source code documents. We wrote a piece back then. I think there's a link in this one here to that piece, but really interesting to read, and provides links to the regime, to Novatex in there. So Novatex has always been used by both lawful Iranians, but also the regime. So kind of trying to provide a picture. You asked about sanctions. Interestingly, and it was great because Jody asked, how long we've been thinking about Iran. Is this new to us? And I would say about maybe 6 weeks ago, we put out a report that linked two cryptocurrency exchanges, ZSEX and ZXion, directly to the IRGC. That report was covered by the Washington Post. About 2 weeks later, OFAC, the U.S. Treasury Department sanctions regulator, sanctioned both of those cryptocurrency exchanges. Basically, what we saw there was the IRGC, which again is Iran's sort of elite military unit, but also intertwined with every aspect of Iranian life, to include financial, to include social, to include religious. And at one point through those, over time, IRGC activity accounted for about maybe 55% of all activity going through those exchanges. In 2024, IRGC activity accounted for about 87%, which says to me these are just shell companies for the IRGC. So what we were able to do is directly tie these entities. We saw about $1 billion in funds flowing through them. Some of those funds were going to the Houthis, which is a proxy group for Iran. Proxy meaning sort of going out and fighting Iran's wars with or for them. So we are seeing crypto infrastructure being used at scale by the regime. But at the same time, we're also seeing lawful users who see cryptocurrency as a lifeline. And I think that's this sort of like tale of two stories, two worlds that we're seeing in Iran right now. Why don't we go from there? You feel free to go any direction you want with that.
Yeah. So Novatex itself, what percentage do you think of that is actually lawful, and what percentage is IRGC when it comes to
that? That's harder to tell.
Yeah.
We're definitely seeing IRGC activity closely connected with Novatex. We're also seeing it used overwhelmingly by average Iranians. So I think that's more of sort of an address to address basis. Novatex is a big exchange. And Novatex, over the course of time, has had compliance controls in place. This is not a ZSEX, right? This is not an exchange that's a shell company for Iran. But when you're in Iran, you have to do what the government wants, essentially. And Novatex has been used over the years at scale by IRGC as well. But for now, and one thing's really important, again, this is what's changing on the ground so quickly. This is kind of the part that I want to caveat a little bit. And that is, there's been some really, in my humble opinion, misleading reports over the last few days about like what's happening in terms of capital flight in Iran. We saw a report that said about 700. There's been a 700% increase in outflows from Novatex. That 700% is based on, I don't know, $3 to $7 million of activity. $3 to $7 million in an $11 billion crypto economy is not capital flight. It's interesting to see the increase, but the increase actually occurred a day after essentially all of the internet infrastructure was taken out in Iran. So it is a real so one thing that is really, I'm really focused on, and I hope your listeners appreciate this, is we really need to explain what the role crypto actually plays. A bunch of years ago, there was some reporting around terror financing and cryptocurrency and sort of the numbers around that in the Wall Street Journal. And it was really weaponized by politicians, I think, against the crypto industry. And it was wrong. The numbers were wrong. And I just want to be really careful in a moment of geopolitical conflict like this, that we really add the nuance. This doesn't mean that there's not going to be capital flight using crypto. It makes sense in a geopolitical crisis. But that's not what we saw the day after the bombing started. And I think it's just really important to sort of put the nuance around that.
Yeah, it makes good headlines or stream headlines.
I love a good headline. I mean, anyone who knows me knows I love a good headline. I know you guys do too. But it's just really important, particularly in this moment where you're talking about war zones, you're talking about Iran, you're talking about a politically charged space to begin with, and you just want to be really careful about the way we're throwing out numbers.
Yeah, people deserve the truth. I think they want to think all the good guys are leaving with Bitcoin, but all the bad guys are using USDT on Tron. But
it is a very nuanced landscape over there, and it's just really important. But I will say that that is the way we've been approaching it. Our team has been amazing. Literally before jumping on here right now, someone said, "Hey, can you talk for a few minutes?" I was like, "No, I'm going on a podcast." But after that, after this, I'm looking forward to kind of hearing the latest update, because I do think it's really nuanced, and we want to present it that way to the world.
Yeah, and I mean, my concern, my heart goes out to the people, of course, who are caught up in all this, just the average everyday people who are not bad guys and who tried to make sure that the money that they had worked for and saved is not taken away from them or sanctioned away. It's so hard to draw the line, right? And make sure that the average everyday people are not swept up
Yeah,
in
I
these overreaching
I think that's
sanctions.
exactly right. And just to put another point on that, look, like so, I think the Iranian people are extraordinary. They have been kept down by a evil regime for decades now, and every time that people rise up, including several weeks ago around the new year, um, it's violently put down. And my hope is that, again, average Iranians, students, dissidents, and others have access to crypto or other types of, financial means in order to protest, to rise up, to overthrow this um, really, really bad government, and look towards self determination and other types of things.
Yeah, especially because the real just hyperinflated, right? It went to 1.5 million reals per dollar. So you're looking at a 100 billion real Bitcoin
To
back.
me, when you think about the use cases for this technology, it's cross-border value transfer at the speed of the internet, for remittances, for humanitarian aid, to pay dissidents without governments being able to track it necessarily, right? Um, it's to do some of the things that is it's to deal with hyperinflation and other types of economic crisis. We've seen that play out in Venezuela and Argentina. It's in places that are even slightly less crazy than Iran right now. So yeah, I absolutely agree. I'm hoping we're using the technology for good in that way.
Yeah, and you just mentioned dissidents, right? Without privacy, these dissidents cannot do their actions towards
Critical.
good. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you just mentioned that you saw a 500% that you didn't mention on the show. You mentioned previously, I think in Albany, 500% increase in AI-enabled cyber attacks, or it's AI-enabled fraud. Tell us a little bit about the effect of AI you're seeing now. We got Sonnet 4.6. We got the latest like ChatGPT release.
Now I'm thinking you guys are like in listening devices and stuff. I was in Albany like yesterday. That's amazing. Wednesday I was in Albany. Yeah, I testified before the New York State Senate on scams, right? Which have just been we've seen scam activity proliferate in the last couple of years. So it's interesting. You mentioned the AI piece. We saw about 35 billion in scam activity in 2025. That number is likely 85% higher due to underreporting. Conventional wisdom out there says only about 15% of victims report because of shame, because of not knowing where to report, not understanding that they're a victim. So that number is much, much bigger. My team was able to put together some really cool data on New York. We were able to show about 100 million in crypto related scams in 2025 in New York alone. Again, that number is probably 85% higher. What we are seeing is AI supercharge this type of activity. It's not just scams, and we can kind of get into those other areas, but I think it's really prevalent in the scam space in particular, right? So we've seen that 500% increase in the use of AI in scam activity over the last year or so. And what that means is like tailored, attacks, right? It used to be you'd get this email with broken English and, a Nigerian prince, and you just hit delete. Now this is tailored towards you, not just your name, mentions of family members, maybe where you live, maybe your interests, maybe it comes from your boss, maybe it comes from your girlfriend or your wife. Maybe you get a phone call from the hospital that has your child's voice on it. Maybe it's a deep fake video with your CEO or Elon Musk or whomever. So like bad actors are learning that you can really, really leverage this technology. Toolkits for scamming, AI toolkits for scams are sold on darknet markets, right? To enable this type of activity. So we've put out some cool reports on this. I would definitely encourage folks to read the testimony from New York from a couple of days ago, but also we put out a report on AI-enabled crime. I testified before the House Judiciary Committee over the summer on AI crime, first ever hearing on that topic. Encourage folks to read that testimony. But it's not just fraud. but we are really seeing scammers leverage this stuff at scale.
Yeah. We recently did I did an article, I believe end of last week, and it's one of this like Alby, which has a Bitcoin wallet infrastructure, and they created a mail mic, which is an agent publicly hosted that you can email, and you're basically trying out different prompt injections to try to get Mike to give you sats, and I think it's really good from the education piece to show, okay, here's how prompt injection works, at least at a high level of playing around. So we had our bot, Claudius, who's like an OpenClaw bot, come up with 10 different attacks and then try to get like, hey, like, this is me overriding the system within a prompt, right? Just like what you put in ChatGPT or any model, but you're sending this public agent these prompts to try to get to override his system. And what people don't realize is they connect, they have a secure setup on their computer, but they're sending out all their data out to these like LLMs. And, with Quinn, or, you have Moonshot AI is based in Beijing. It's a cheap model, but you're also sending data externally. Like, are you guys?
We're in a crazy moment. I mean, there's two pieces to this puzzle, right? There's the AI crime piece. We're seeing it used by ransomware actors to spin up affiliates. We're seeing it I mentioned the 500% increase in scam activity. We're seeing it used to launder funds, right? Programmatically launder funds here. But we're also using it today in every layer of our platform. We're building AI native tools for blockchain and non-blockchain investigations, right? Like, so the reality is that like the bad actors are going to use this, but the good guys are going to use it to fight back. And, I think I don't want to overstate, like everyone knows I'm like the most optimistic guy in crypto. I think like I believe in the space. I believe in like TRM and the mission to stop these bad actors. But this bad guys using AI presents like a civilization level threat. And I know that's crazy to say. This is not national security, right? Basically today, ransomware groups use affiliates, meaning like franchisees, think McDonald's. You can sort of, hey, you can make an agreement with a ransomware group. They will provide you their malware, you deploy it, and you give them a percentage of the funds you're able to ultimately get from that, whether it's a ransomware attack or a hack. Imagine a world in which these groups don't need affiliates. They have agentic agents who just do this at scale. So that's not just one health system in the UK being brought down by Lockbit. That's every health system at the same time in every country in the world. That's like when people are in the streets. Okay.
Yeah.
So my message is, this needs to be leveraged by every law enforcement agency in the world. And we need to make sure we're doing it now, because these tools are really powerful, and they're really powerful for good. We just need to make sure we're using them. And bad actors are just today early adopters of this technology. It's interesting. I've said this before. I love this. This is like one of my favorite analogies. In 1908, the Model T rolled off the assembly line, and it really democratized transportation, right? All of a sudden, people had access to cars in a way that they never did before. It used to be something only like a very elite, wealthy group had access to. That was also the year that we stood up the Bureau of Investigation, which is now the FBI, because policing became more than a local thing, right? You now needed to be able to move cross-border faster than ever before, because bad guys were early adopters of that technology. Think Bonnie and Clyde and Al Capone and Machine Gun Kelly.
Bootleggers.
And we're seeing the same thing today, but in cyberspace. And we just need to make sure that bad guys who are early adopters of automobiles, of pagers, of cell phones, of end-to-end messaging apps, end-to-end encrypted messaging apps, of crypto, of now AI, we need to make sure we're using it as well.
And what we're also seeing is that AI helps with the social engineering, right? A lot of this is getting people to do things against their own best interest by convincing them, as you said, using recordings of their loved ones and whatnot. But another crazy story that I've heard is these kids, right? They meet on Roblox at the age of 13, and then by 17, they've created these rings of social engineering where they send you the Coinbase text message that says, hey, somebody's trying to get your account. Can you log on to change your password or whatever? Then they get you on the phone, and then they start talking to you, and then you send them your Bitcoin. You give them your seed phrase and they're able to take everything from you. Are you seeing this with the younger generations that are more online savvy, getting into these crimes?
It's crazy. It makes me feel lucky that my kids went right past Roblox, right to FanDuel. Now, the more I think about it here, I was always upset by that, but now that makes me feel better. You know, I think it is. I think like we're more and more interconnected. And, you know, as a father, first and foremost, of a 15-year-old and a 12-year-old, I mean, we are like right in the mix, right? So I think the challenge is like, you know, quite frankly, and I said this before Congress recently, their schools don't allow them to use this technology. And my view is that they absolutely should. They should use it in every workflow they can, because their entire future is going to be predicated on their ability to manipulate and use these tools. Mm-hmm. That said, we also need to, like, you know, those brains are not fully developed. And I have 2 boys, so I can tell you their brains are definitely not fully developed. Okay. Yeah. Some of the girls I meet, I'm like, okay, maybe like that person might have to make good decisions. Not these boys. But I do think that we need to figure out like public awareness. We need to really work through all these things. Like, you have to know when you meet someone online that is not the person that they say they are, you know. And I think this is in part parenting, this is in part technology, but I think more than anything else, like, the future is here. And we need to make sure that we're understanding how to take advantage of the technology rather than allowing it to take advantage of us.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, there's one more story that I do want to get into with you, and that is the Prince Group and the pig butchering scam, because the scale of that is just unprecedented, and we need to talk about the multi-layers of just how truly evil that whole entire operation really was, and how grateful we should be that actors like you helped to take that thing like that down. But before we do that, we got to talk about Arch, because Arch is the world's leading destination for Bitcoin-backed loans. They provide world-class security and a white glove service, so you never have to sell your Bitcoin. If you listen to this, you did the hard part. You stacked, you held, you did not panic sell. But life happens. There's taxes, new opportunities. Say you want to start a business, but you don't want to sell your Bitcoin. It just feels wrong. That's where Arch comes in. Think of it like a flexible line of credit with rates starting as low as 8.5% APR. Borrow what you need, repay anytime, and only pay interest on what you use, all without triggering a tax event. Go today to archlending.com/dailystack. Again, archlending.com/dailystack. And
you have a great radio voice, but it's even better when you're doing those commercials, for sure. I mean, you get really love it. Yeah,
bro.
No, they're nice enough to help make this show possible.
They are getting their money's worth. That was awesome.
Give them my all.
Yeah, they got it. Yeah.
But yes, let's talk about this Prince Group. What was going on over in Cambodia? This is a multinational story. 127,000 Bitcoin seized by the U.S. government, taking it back from these guys. Billions of dollars stolen from Americans, Westerners all over the world. What happened here, and how did they crack this case?
Yeah, no, thanks for asking. I think it's the most important story in 2025 in terms of how I think about our space. Just sort of stepping back a moment, really what we've seen is generational wealth transfer from Americans to organized criminal networks in Southeast Asia, in Africa, in places like Dubai. And basically, you know, every time you get a text message, and this happens to me, I'm sure I'll look at my phone, and it's happened to me 3 times while I've been on this conversation. It says, "Hey, how you doing? Oh, I couldn't find your name, and I see you in my contacts." You know, I even get sometimes like, "Hey, are you golfing on Saturday?" Like, what? I don't golf. I'm like the only lawyer in DC who doesn't golf, but I don't golf. And what they expect is for you to respond, and for that to be the jumping off point to a relationship. And oftentimes that relationship is romantic at the beginning. You get to know that person, you talk, you share private details, and eventually, it could be weeks, it could be months, it ends up in an investment conversation where it's like, hey, I just bought this house, or I just bought a Lamborghini, or I bought my mom a car. And I say, wow, how'd you do that? I say, well, wow, there's this great cryptocurrency platform. And maybe it's a legit one that they actually manipulate and send you a version of it. But ultimately, they ask you, hey, send funds here. You send funds, and oftentimes there'll be a return, sometimes significant. You'll double your money in a day. And that'll keep going for a while until you send more and more funds. And it's a horrible term called pig butchering. But essentially what's happening is they're fattening up the victim, ultimately to butcher or slaughter that person. And by the end of all this, you've lost your life savings, you've lost potentially hundreds, thousands, millions of dollars. And we are seeing these operations run by organized criminal networks in places like Cambodia, Laos, Vietnam, Myanmar. There's connections to China in almost all of them. Chinese money laundering organizations are being used to launder the funds. So I say all of this to say that this is not like one-off scamming that is going on out there, right? This is not fraud. This is not a law enforcement issue. This is a massive national security issue where we're seeing billions and billions of dollars stolen from Americans and people in Japan and Singapore and Korea and elsewhere, and going into the coffers of organized criminal networks. There's this other crazy piece to this whole thing where the scammers themselves are often victims of human trafficking. So they are lured to these scam compounds in Southeast Asia. Someone who's awesome at this, who's really, in my mind, the voice of amplifying this issue is a woman named Erin West, who's a former California state prosecutor, who is an amazing follow on LinkedIn. She's over in Southeast Asia putting videos up, showing these scam compounds, showing how they work. But basically, like, so the scammers are 24/7, and these things are run like corporations. You know, you do a good job, you're employee of the week, you get maybe a bonus. If you do a bad job, you get beaten. And it's really extraordinary. So I say all of that to put in context, what happened here is the US finally did use national security authorities to go after one of these scam compounds called Prince Group. And Prince Group's leader, a guy named Shen Zi, was in the highest levels of the Cambodian government, had connections to China, and ultimately he was engaging in this activity at scale. They were making at one point, according to the forfeiture action, $30 million a day, right? That's stealing $30 million a day from Americans. This is not like this is not a law enforcement issue. This is like a massive, massive epidemic. So ultimately, the U.S. government came out and they sanctioned Prince Group, meaning cut it off from the U.S. financial system, sanctioned Shen Zi. FinCEN came in using some of their authorities, which is part of the U.S. Treasury Department. They named one of Prince Group's major financial services hubs, something called We1. They made it a primary money laundering concern, which means it was also completely cut from the financial system. And finally, they indicted Shen Zi, but also, wait for it, as you previewed, they did a $15 billion forfeiture action, the largest in human history by I don't know, like 3, 4, 5 times. And the reality now, that forfeiture process is going through the courts. It's been contested. Prince Group actually has lawyers, U.S. lawyers, and we'll see how all of that plays out. But to me, what that says is, like, finally, we're fighting back in a way that involves using national security tools as opposed to just law enforcement tools.
So the legitimacy of the Prince Group, are they really able to recover the 15 billion? Like, is that, are they like,
you mean come into court and recover that? There is no world. Yeah. I think there's a story out there that's a real question about, like, where those funds came from, how the U.S. government ultimately got their hands on them. I'm not sure I would go too deep into that here. We wrote a bunch of stuff on it, but there's a lot of interesting pieces to that story in terms of that $15 billion. But to me, if it's going from bad guys to good guys, I am very supportive of that action. I will say, in the wake of Prince Group, the Department of Justice stood up a task force called the Scam Compound Strike Force that is basically dedicated to working with law enforcement across FBI, HSI, IRSCI, the Department of Justice, OFAC, to start to really target these things. You know, what's extraordinary, and, like, I'm very proud of the Prince Group action and what our friends in government and DOJ and FBI were able to do. But there are 15 other Prince Groups. These compounds are all over the world now. These are multinational corporations. And we've got to use whatever tools we have. And whether that means, it's controversial, I know, but whether that means financial tools or kinetic tools, like, there's no worlds where these things should exist. They are, to me, we've designated these Mexican drug cartels as FTOs, foreign terrorist organizations. I think these organizations probably rise to that level.
Yeah, and the level of geopolitical intrigue is just so high, right? Because Chenji, he worked himself up to the highest levels of the Cambodian government. Last I saw of him, he was extradited to China. And so if you've got America versus China, there's 127,000 Bitcoin in the middle of it all. There's a lot
without any inside baseball on this. I saw that he got sent back to China. I just felt like he just flew he flew too close to the sun, and the Chinese were just never going to let that guy ever find his way to the United States.
Yeah.
So I assume that they did not want him debriefed by the U.S. government, even if we just grabbed him in some way. So I assume that was a preemptive strike on us sort of getting information from him. But what's interesting is like, you don't have to have any inside information. Like, read that forfeiture complaint and read the indictment. It talks about not only being at the highest levels of the Cambodian government, but it talks about Prince Group's connections to Chinese national security agencies, which, wow. Yeah.
Last question for me, TRM Run Club.
Oh, I love it. Yes. Finally, we got to a good one. All right, go for it.
And TRM Run Club, what's the process been? Have you ever raced anyone? And what's your 2026 shoe?
Oh my gosh, I love all of that. Wow, that's fantastic. Okay, so the Run Club is like one of my favorite stories. And that is like, when I first got to TRM, I was traveling a lot. I was meeting with regulators. I was going to these conferences, Paris Blockchain Week and Singapore FinTech Festival and all over. And I would just put in my LinkedIn normally, like, hey, I'm going to be in London next week to meet with, some folks. If you want to run with me, just DM me. And it was always like meet up in my hotel and like we'd go out for like a 6 a.m. run or something. It was like one person might show up, maybe no one, maybe I'd get 5. And all of a sudden, like, it became a really cool thing. And what really blew it up was in Austin. So like maybe 2 to 3 years ago, Consensus reached out totally like cold and was just like, hey, we think this is cool what you do. Can we make the TRM Run Club an official event of the conference? And I was like, what? I was like, this is career defining stuff. Forget, big crypto cases, right? So anyway, we did it. About 100 people showed up in Austin, and it's really just like taken off from there. We had about 100 people in Toronto last year for Consensus, Singapore FinTech Festival. We're running in Sydney next week for Policy Week, which is going to be so cool. And yeah, it's been really super cool adventure. We do DC Blockchain Week, which is great. It's been this really kind of pinch me deal. It's like the coolest thing in life. And I see you guys do this, just like talking to you, every once in a while. You've combined your passion with your business, with your job. And the fact that I'm able to do that is just so cool. I've put this all over the place, but my wife, who blows me away all the time as a runner and as a person, just completed running a marathon in every US state. So, like it's been like part of our journey for 30 years running together, and to be able to do that, like in our space, and to see people networking and talking. And I see regulators running with like, people who are builders in DeFi. I see like law enforcement chatting with, just like, someone at an exchange. It's just so cool. So anyway, all that said, you asked really good questions. For a while I've been like, I had every Nike Air, like their top kind of running shoe for a long time. And they kind of went away from that. So I'd say the last like bunch of years, I've been a Pegasus guy pretty much just solidly. I've never messed around with Hoka's. Like there's all Asics, like there's some like real running shoes out there, but I'm a Nike guy. Style over substance, like let's just do this. They always look good. I custom every once in a while. I'll do TRM Run Club on the shoe, which is fun. But yeah, awesome question, and thanks for asking it.
Yeah, but you got, man. I got to get in the Run Club.
Please, yeah. Please, next time we're anywhere near each other, let's go for a run.
Yeah, we'll get some Daily Stack shoes as well. We'll customize them.
Let's do it. Oh, I love that. Yeah.
Are you coming to Vegas?
So we've done the Run Club in Vegas. We do one for ACAMS every year, which is in October. I've done Money 2020 also. So I think we can make Vegas happen. I will tell you, I'm often asked, what is the worst running city in America since we've done all these marathons? It's Vegas. It's literally a city that is designed to trap you inside.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to escape, right? Like I'm running across, you're running across the strip over bridges. And then all of a sudden you're like, oh no, this one takes me inside Excalibur or whatever. I'm like, no, I don't want to go inside. I want to stay out. It is crazy there, but I feel like I've now done it, 5-6 years in a row where I feel like I'm decent at running across the strip. Ironically, it's one of the most beautiful places to run in the world. We did a really cool marathon when we did our state there. I want to say it was called Love Canyon. It was just like 25 minutes outside of Vegas. In this just like in and out of these gorgeous canyons in Nevada, right? You don't have to run on the strip, but if you do, man, it's rough.
It's brutal. I picked my wife up at the airport and I ran from the casino to the airport, and I'm like showing up sweaty, but like that's what the run is. It doesn't get that much better, you know. You're just running on concrete and
not good. Awesome. Thank you guys.
Cheers. Yeah, this has been a very insightful conversation. Thank you so much for your time. If people want to follow you, what TRM is up to, where should they go?
Check out trmlabs.com. I'm much better on LinkedIn than I am on Twitter, but I give it a shot because I know that's where crypto lives. But check it out. I have a podcast also called TRM Talks. Would love folks to listen to. A lot of compliance, investigations, policy. And I love the conversation today. Thanks for having me.
Cheers. Our pleasure.
It's been a pleasure.
All right, everybody. Thank you so much for tuning in. This has been the Friday Stack. We are live every single day, Monday through Friday, 12:30 p.m. Eastern. It's been an absolute pleasure. Until Monday, catch you. Have a great weekend.